morning, everyone. My name is Derek Goring. I'm the Vice President of Development at First Gulf Corporation and the Chair of ULI Toronto. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our 2017 Symposium. What an amazing two-day conference we have set up for you. Over the course of today and tomorrow, more than 1,500 people will have participated in our programming featuring more than 100 speakers. For those of you who are not familiar with Urban Land Institute, we are a worldwide organization with a global mandate to advance the responsible use of land and create thriving and healthy communities. There are about 40,000 ULI members globally, and at 1,700 members, the Toronto District Council is the fifth largest and fastest growing large district council in the network. As I state in the conference program you received this morning, this year's symposium builds on our inaugural 2015 symposium that pursued the interconnecting city-building themes of mobility, placemaking, and technology. While this year's broad themes are the same, the context around them has changed significantly. As such, we are presenting conversations that are very different today than they would have been just 2 years ago. Such is the pace of change in the world in which we live, work, and play. Our Executive Director, Richard Joy, will be up after our first plenary panel to expand in more detail on what the symposium seeks to explore, and including the advancement of our Electric Cities initiative. Richard will be followed by a special panel of this year's symposium co-chairs who will further set up the exciting programming on offer over the next 2 days. But first, a few thank yous. I want to start by thanking staff, Richard, Alex, Aaron, and Lauren, who have put in tireless hours working to organize this conference, as well as the many volunteers that have put in many hours with respect to programming and the thought leadership, as well as all the people that are helping us organize the event today. So thank you very much. I also want to thank our symposium sponsors. So I'll start with the session sponsors who are behind our rich and diverse panel sessions. They are Arup, Atrium Mortgage Investment Corporation, BA Group, Davies Howe Partners, Everett, Ellis Don, Goodmans, Hallmark, Kilmer Group, Minden Gross, the Consulate General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Pension, and Strategy Corp. Thank you. I would next like to extend our great appreciation to 3 companies who stepped up to be major sponsors of our symposium. Thank you to Hatch, Woodbine Entertainment Group, and IBI Group. Hatch and Woodbine Entertainment are relatively new to ULI Toronto, and we really appreciate your support of our mandate as we represent a diverse multi-sector, member-based organization of public and private sector professionals. And a special thank you to IBI, who are back again as a major sponsor, having also supported our 2015 symposium. Thank you to our major sponsors. And finally, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to Toronto Pearson, our presenting sponsor. Toronto Pearson is arguably our most regional of institutions, a critical hub for the entire Greater Golden Horseshoe and beyond. While the fact that this is perhaps inherent in their core business as our international airport, what isn't inherent is the degree to which Pearson Airport has taken up our leadership role as an active region builder. Toronto Pearson's leadership team are active in a wide variety of region building endeavors, from the community level to regional economic development and mobility. Pearson did not hesitate to expand their support of ULI this year, stepping up as the presenting sponsor of our Meet the Chiefs Gala dinner happening tonight, as well as supporting this year's symposium as our presenting sponsor. Thank you, Toronto Pearson. It's now my pleasure to invite Hilary Marshall, Vice President, Stakeholder Relations and Communications at Toronto Pearson, to the stage to introduce our first plenary panel session. Hilary.
Thanks so much, Derek. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the GTAA and the 50,000 people who work at Toronto Pearson, I'm very pleased to help launch ULI Toronto's Electric City Symposium. And Derek, I appreciate the comment with respect to our role as region builder. We do indeed take this role very seriously, and it's a natural fit for us to support endeavors such as this regionally focused conference that brings together a wide range of professional and geographical diversity of the greater Golden Horseshoe. It's become increasingly clear that even as Toronto Pearson continues to grow as an international connector of people and business, we're at the same time a distinctly local entity. Of course, we're an airport, but we're also a business partner, an employer, a ground transportation hub, a steward of the environment, a region builder, and much more. We know that our vision of Toronto and the airport needs to reflect this. We're excited about the challenges and the opportunities ahead of us, and we've put together a video that you'll start to see very soon as part of a campaign called Pearson Connects, and we want you to be the first to see it.
Sweet spot, I'm feeling good. The sun is shining, I knew it would. The world's a playground, I'm in the clouds. Let me show you what it's all about. Check it out, I'm gonna light it up, yeah, I'm gonna light it up. Check it out, I'm gonna light it up, yeah, I'm gonna light it up. Just check it out, I'm gonna light it up, yeah, I'm gonna light it up. Let me show you what it's all about. Check it out. I'm on the big stage, I got my crew. I'll get you moving, it's what I do. I'm gonna light it up, yeah, I'm gonna light it up. Check it out, I'm gonna light it up, yeah, I'm gonna light it up. Just check it out, I'm gonna light it up, yeah, I'm gonna light it up. Let me show you what it's all about. Check it out, I'm gonna light it up, yeah, I'm gonna light it up. Let me show you what it's all about. Check it out.
Well, that'll wake you up. Thank you. In short, as you've seen, Toronto Pearson is a city, and it must serve as an anchor in what is unquestionably one of the most important urban hubs in the region, in the center of Canada's second largest employment megazone, the airport. This role is made more vital by the fact that, as you all know, despite great opportunities that exist here, this airport city is deeply challenged by placemaking and public transit perspectives, which is why we're especially proud to share our vision for a regional transit center, a vision that would expand public transit to include the Finch and Eglinton LRTs, Mississauga Bus Rapid Transit, and a potential high-speed rail link to Kitchener-Waterloo, all connecting at Pearson. Importantly, it would also redefine this industrial employment zone, making it a vibrant mix of commercial, industrial, retail, and hotel spaces. Toronto Pearson is clearly making its name on a global stage, but we're equally proud staking our claim as a local hero. And so it's indeed with great pleasure to be able to introduce ULI Toronto's first panel, Global Giants, Local Heroes, a panel that puts a spotlight on 4 of our region's great global companies and how having their roots and home offices here in this region have made them competitive the world over. It's a great story and one that we should be especially proud of. So without further delay, it's my honor to introduce this super panel's super moderator, Jan De Silva, President of the Toronto and Region Board of Trade. Jan?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thanks, Hillary. I haven't had an introduction like that before. Anyway, but I want to echo Derek's comments first about the amazing city and region builder role that Pearson is playing. I think we're all aware of what an amazing airport it is. It's our second largest international airport in North America. It's also our largest international air cargo destination. And it's our second largest employment zone, the area around Pearson, second largest in Canada. So we so applaud your ambition for this regional transit center. It's so smart and so badly needed. So we look forward to working with you. It's a great ambition for the city. So a shout out to Pearson and to Hillary again. Thank you. So our mayor recently said that Toronto is Canada's champion and the only global metropolis in our country. And Brookings Institution agrees, citing us as being on the cusp of becoming a global giant alongside the likes of New York, Tokyo, London, and Hong Kong. And so there is no better time and no better place and no better event to be kicking off a discussion with some of our global giants, local heroes, on what it's going to take that next step, because they're actively involved in helping us build the city, build the infrastructure that we need to achieve that goal. Toronto is one of the fastest growing regions in North America, and as we work to accommodate that growth, it's perhaps a little known fact of how much talent in the area of city building, infrastructure, professional consultants, capital markets, and construction exists in our city. We were chatting just before our session began, and David was reflecting on the fact that, yes, we've had a lot of headlines about our housing and our transit challenges, but they work around the world, and every big city deals with this. And so it'll be interesting to hear from them how they've come to start in Toronto and move elsewhere, and what those lessons learned around the world can lead to us here. For Toronto truly punches above its weight in the realm of infrastructure and city building, and we have for many years. It's a fact that we certainly don't recognize enough, and one that we don't cheer about. So what Richard and Derek have asked me to do today is make sure we understand what this talent looks like, what this experience is doing for us, and that we take a deep bow for all of the tremendous capabilities that we have in the city. So let's start by meeting our stellar group of urban leaders. First, Jim Perry, Senior Vice President of Hatch. Jim has an accomplished career, more than 39 years of experience as a project program manager, architect, and design consultant. He's worked around the world. We were talking on the way in about 12 years at Canary Wharf, the Tel Aviv light rail system, actively involved in the Young subway extension to Richmond Hill, and reference design for 6 of the underground stations for Eglinton Crosstown, just to touch a very, very few items. And you were involved in the business case for the $14 billion Metrolinx Regional Express Rail program, which is going to totally transform the way GTHA is able to function. Michael Cooper, President and Chief Responsible Officer for Dream Unlimited. Michael founded Dream, a real estate investment and management company with $15 billion of assets under investment. Under his direction, Dream has grown to be a trailblazer in commercial real estate, residential land and housing development, and alternative energy infrastructure. Among his accomplishments are 4 TSX-listed investment trusts, and most recently the formation of Dream Hard Asset Alternatives Trust. Next to Michael is David Thom, President and Managing Director, IBI Group. David specializes in the planning and design of complex projects that integrate planning, architecture, and transportation. He's had several senior positions for many major urban development projects across Canada, in the US, and internationally, including public-private partnerships and private finance initiatives. And rounding out our panel is Michael Turner, EVP and Head of Canada, Oxford Properties Group. Michael is responsible for all aspects of Oxford's Canadian investment, development, and management operations across 5 asset classes and 50 million square feet. He's a member of the company's investment committee and executive committee. He joined Oxford in 2010 after 13 years of global real estate experience, leading significant transactions for many of North America's largest commercial real estate owners. Our panelists and their company are homegrown, and at the same time, they do truly serve as role models for doing business globally, something we'd be encouraging more of our businesses throughout Toronto to be doing. I hope this session, Global Giants, Local Heroes, will help us do both. Recognize and celebrate a great Toronto and Canadian success stories of international success. Now, I'd like to start off the panel by asking each of the panelists to spend roughly about 3 minutes giving a short summary of how the company got established in Toronto region before pursuing international businesses. So, Jim, can we start with you, please?
So Hatch was founded by a man named Jerry Hatch, building on a 6-person team started by a guy named Bill Atkins of W.S. Atkins back in 1955. And in that area, and Jerry was a metallurgist, but he had a guy working for him by the name of Ted Noskovich, who was a civil engineer from London Underground. And we got involved in early days in the subways, in Toronto subway, and in particular the university subway. And so on the infrastructure front, it was our involvement with the TTC in particular, building the university subway, the Yonge subway, the Bloor Danforth subway, that allowed us to build that capability and certainly become one of the leading tunneling engineers and moving from that into infrastructure. On the other side, a lot of people will not know this. We are one of the leading metallurgical consultants in the world, and clients like Falconbridge and Inco, which are now owned by foreign companies, were the bread and butter that allowed us to start it. And so we've always focused on those two areas, and it's from that we built up an organization that starting in the late 70s, early 80s, we moved out of Toronto and spread around the world. But we're a company of about 9,000 employees spread around the world, but it was Toronto that really allowed us to build our capability and grow from there.
Great.
I started in the business prior to the 1992 recession, and Toronto had you probably had 5 of the top 10 global developers. It was, whether it was like O&Y or Bramley or Trizec, Oxford, it was incredible competition, and this city was way overweight fantastic developers. In 1992, it was a very tough time, and there was a lot of rejigging. I went and joined a company that ran mutual funds because I didn't know another industry where you can have the owner broke and the customers didn't know. And I thought that was a pretty good industry. And then I kind of thought, who's going to own these buildings? I do things simply. And when I thought about it, I thought I had a chance. And that was the whole premise. However, when we started, our office was here in Toronto, and we invested everywhere but Toronto. It was very difficult to start. Looking back, it's different, but between 1994 and 1997, we built out an incredible business in Western Canada. And it wasn't until 1998 that we started to do something serious in Toronto. Since then, we developed a lot of houses. We built huge communities and every part of the communities. We bought the distillery in 2004. We bought some buildings. We bought buildings all over the country, office buildings all over the city of Toronto. And I would say what we're seeing now is, in 2011, we were a little giddy getting through the global financial crisis better than anybody. And we saw a huge opportunity in Europe. That's worked out very well. So, ironically, we went to Europe before we came to Toronto. Since then, we continue to grow in Europe, and it's been fantastic. In Canada, what we're seeing is a lot of the cities are getting hollowed out, and Toronto is really benefiting. So we're actually concentrating more and more of our activities in Toronto. And when we say in Toronto, for commercial, it's really downtown. It's fantastic what Pearson's doing. We have buildings around there. God bless you. It would be great to have an urban center there. I think Vaughan Metropolitan Center, that's fantastic. But I think a lot of the other areas, there's not much happening. Downtown is thriving. We're building condos downtown. We built the Pan Am Village with one of your sponsors. And we've been investing a lot. I think it's going to be great down here. But this city is overcapitalized. There's tremendously strong real estate people, very thoughtful people. And for us, I mean, with some humor, it's been easier for us to go to Hamburg than Toronto.
We're going to work on that.
We're doing okay.
Okay.
Well, Michael, I'm kind of one recession behind you because I started just in the early 80s with IBI and actually in mid-70s. And it was a small group that separated off from Pete Marwick. There was a group within Pete Marwick that were looking at transportation policy, urban planning policies, and it started to get populated by some architects and engineers who thought it would be kind of nice to turn all those words and reports into actual stuff and buildings. So a group of about 30, 28 in Toronto and 2 in Vancouver, split off and formed IBI Group. And one of the founding partners, Neil Irwin, he really pioneered the use of computer forecasting for land use development, transportation planning, and smart growth patterns. So the sort of the DNA of the firm has been really consistent since then, and actually, interestingly, quite aligned with the theme of this conference of placemaking, transportation, and technology. And when we started, we had a couple of clients who remain clients today, and there were government agencies, and that was at a time when Toronto was going through a restructuring into a regional government structure. And we were doing work for regional government as well as the transportation agencies, and Metrolinx continues today to be one of our major clients. And we also started working on the Toronto rail lands, helping move out designing the system to move the railways out of downtown Toronto, and we continue today to work on that. The majority of the buildings that are designed and are under construction and on the Toronto rail lands for Concord Pacific are all work done by our firm. So that incubation of working at that level on some pretty fundamental projects that have changed the face of Toronto, changed IBI as well, and we were fortunate to have that kind of grounding in a city and be part of the evolution of that city. I do have a confession to make. I don't live in Toronto. I grew up here, went to university in Toronto, and started with IBI in Toronto. But I live in Vancouver. I spent a lot of my time at Toronto Airport, and so I know that well. And but it does, and I'm the only member of the executive. And our firm's now 2,800 people globally, and I'm the only member of the executive of the company that doesn't live in Toronto. So it gives me an interesting perspective that starts at 5:30 every morning. Anyway, I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to the discussion with my fellow panel members.
Thanks, David. Michael?
Yeah, Oxford celebrated its 54th year just a couple of years ago. The company was started in 1960 with a building called the Essex Building in Edmonton, and it was a medical office building. And for those of you who know the history of the Love family, Donald Love was a serial entrepreneur, and I never had the opportunity to meet him, but as the story I've read and been told goes, he was a stockbroker, and he had some doctors who were his customers, and they decided that they wanted to own their own building. And Donald Love was one of the only business people that they knew. So they asked him, you know something about business, you know how to build a building, right? And he was a good stockbroker, and so he said, of course I do. And so that was the commencement of the company. And really, there was probably a 20-year period of aggressive growth where Oxford went, the Pool Construction Limited, which is now PCL, went, and I'd probably say also about half the time where those two went the Royal Bank, either in the form of an occupant who needed a building in whatever city in Canada, or certainly in the form of a lender. So very aggressive period of growth in the 1960s and 70s, and in 1975, Donald Love bought Y&R Properties, which built Richmond Adelaide Complex, which we now own. And so you know, the Baker Building, which is 100 Adelaide, an old historic Art Deco building, which we're currently completing a new project on. That was, I believe, Oxford's first acquisition in Toronto. So at some point in the late 70s, the company moved, and I don't know the exact date, from Edmonton to Toronto, and it was probably just because of the number of projects here. Its largest customer and its largest lender was here, and through a series of acquisitions, it sort of pulled its activity from Western Canada to Central Canada. And the company had an aggressive period of growth in the 70s and 80s. I would say, looking at the archive books I did last week just to remind myself of the story, very, I'd say, project-driven, deal-driven, chasing opportunities in Phoenix, Denver, Dallas, et cetera, and Milwaukee. And then the company got itself into trouble, like a lot of great real estate companies in the 1980s. And the current version of Oxford, as people may know, is really the amalgamation of what was then called Omer's Realty Corp. So Omer's had a very solid real estate portfolio, and it acquired Oxford looking for a platform that had capabilities in development and in management. So the current portfolio, the Canadian component of it, I would say, is the amalgamation of Omer's Realty Corp and Oxford Properties.
Okay, thanks. Well, it's interesting. Let's reflect on what it was in the starting point of going global that Toronto enabled you to have that opportunity. I mean, was it TTC work? Was that, Jim, if we think about it, at that era, the world was coming to see the TTC.
That's true, and certainly the Young Line is a good example of that. But in the 70s, transit work basically in Toronto kind of ground to a halt, with the exception of GO Transit getting started in 1967. And that was the point when, from a transit side, we started to look elsewhere. So Buffalo was building their LRT, Australia was looking in Melbourne at modifying the downtown section of the commuter rail that comes into that city. Baltimore was doing work, so the tunneling work basically came to an end in Toronto, and we started to look elsewhere to offer that service, and it was quite successful. On the other side of the coin, on the industrial side, the metallurgical side, some of our bigger clients were starting to look at bigger projects overseas, and I think we pride ourselves on a long relationship with some of our clients, which we've had for the last 50 or 60 years continuously, and so we went overseas with those clients. But nevertheless, our base was always in Toronto, and we were either at Yonge and Bloor or at Yonge and St. Clair, and subsequently moved out of town, but nevertheless, we were here. So it really was, the 70s was a period of kind of transition in Toronto. Things started to change in towards the 80s, and we actually became involved in the Vancouver SkyTrain project at that point in time as well. So I think there was a transition period of the 70s, and then things started to pick up. There were a lot of studies done in terms of transit development in the 70s and the 80s, and then it started to happen after that.
Okay. Now, Michael, I liked your reflection that, you started in Europe before you did Toronto, and that's something we feel as a business community all the time. It tends to be this mindset of anywhere but Toronto. I'm just joking, that happens with government a lot in terms of where they place opportunities. But what was it about your roots in Toronto that enabled Europe to happen?
Just to be clear, I think we're in the top 5 owners of office buildings in downtown Toronto. And a bunch of that happened after 2011, and we've got a lot of development here. So we're well positioned in Toronto. We're concentrating even more. I think, like, one of the thoughts that I have is I've been pretty negative on Canadian companies going to the States. They have a lot of capital. They got a lot of good people there, and quite bluntly, most of my interactions with American companies I haven't loved. So I thought that we had investors from Europe since 1998. We went over there. So we knew a lot of people there, and they were going through a crisis, and we thought the overall environment in Europe was great, and it reminded me a little bit of about 1992 when everybody had given up. So it was easier to enter. I would say the shock, because I always think about Germany like everything's perfect when they do things, and our guys had a lot of skill on property management that they didn't have, and I think we ran buildings better. Because it's so competitive here, we were able to convince people to work with us much more efficient on choosing a building, doing the due diligence, and then doing what we said, much better than the German environment was. So I think we had a lot of advantages, and I think we got $3.5 billion of great assets there, and we did it very quickly because of it. But I just think there was more room for us in Germany than there was in the States.
Okay. But ultimately, then, if we just go back to, so the first properties in Toronto, what was the trigger for that?
We could afford them.
Okay.
I don't know if that resonates with anybody. We were making a lot of money in other places, and I think Toronto is just a sensational city, and I think there's too many people taking credit for it. I think a lot of it is happenstance or just where it's positioned. I think it's got a long time ahead of it. Its importance in Canada is overwhelming compared to any cities. So I think if you like Canada, you got to be here in a big way.
Okay, perfect. David, your thoughts on that? What was it about Toronto that enabled global growth?
There are two aspects. One of them was connections. Our first foray into the U.S. was as part of a due diligence team with Cadillac Fairview, who were looking to buy the Irvine Ranch in Southern California.
They should have done it.
They'd ended up not doing it, and but it introduced us to the Irvine Company, and we developed for them. At the time, they were starting to urbanize and looking at more urban housing forms, and being a very suburban development community, we developed the multifamily housing policies for them, and that really launched us into housing design in Southern California. And the other foray was on the technology side. I mentioned our connection to technology when we started the firm, and that got us into the UK in the 80s. We went there partly because there was a global recession, and the UK wasn't quite as bad as Canada. But it did, and we developed a technology that, and we still deploy it in various forms today. It's evolved over time, but it has to do with mapping, and now we're mapping all of the UK highway system with it. But it really looked at sort of technology and sort of assembling data to enable them to manage their highway system, and that led us into a whole series of other technology applications. One of the more recent ones, the London Olympics, where we developed the transportation plan for the London Olympics, and using the same sort of technology backbone that we developed in Canada. And I can remember at the time, just during the Olympics, Gordon Camp was the High Commissioner to London, and I was talking to him about it, and he said, "Why aren't you making a big noise about it? It's a Toronto company, and it's making a big difference in London." And I said, "Well, Gordon, we're not sure it's going to work yet, so we want to wait until the Olympics are over." But it actually has worked, and it's really left a legacy. And for those of you who've been in London since 2010, it's a different kind of city in terms of its downtown mobility. So, and it's really it's partly I guess it's really a combination of the two. It really is the connections that we've been able to make in Toronto, and Torontonians are cast a wide net across the world, and for us, a lot of our expansion and continues today, even in Europe and in the United States. It's really connections with our Canadian clients, many of them based here in Toronto, combined with the technology side, and it's. And we've always had that. We've always developed technologies, applications to smart buildings and smart cities, and that's very topical today. And so it's really helped us expand.
And Michael, for you, what was it that Oxford had in Toronto that enabled International to become possible?
Capital.
Okay.
So
Okay.
They can afford it.
we had money. I'd say we had a very good business here. And, 15 years ago, Toronto represented, Oxford had 20 million square feet or 22 million square feet of office space in this city. Today we have 10 or 12. So we've shrunk in terms of our footprint. We've grown in terms of the value of assets that we manage. And really, we're on version, what I would call 3.0 of international expansion. First was Donald Love, and that resulted in this, a story that ended in tears, but some great yearbooks, and I'm sure there's some great parties along the way, and he built a great company. We also expanded what I would call, I call it airplane investing, where you think you're really smart from Toronto, and people get on airplanes and they show up and they're doing deals, and I can assure you that if you show up in a market where you're not established, you're like the 500th person that's looked at that opportunity. So it's a really, really efficient way to lose money. But in this version, we had a great business here, had great cash flow, and candidly, the capital base that is our shareholder, which is OMERS, had outgrown the opportunity set of Canada and of Toronto. So that there was a catalyst there, diversify, we had a good business, and we could front-end load the costs of building offices in places like New York and London, which cost us millions and millions of dollars for many, many years before we had a business. So if we didn't have that base here, we wouldn't have been able to do that, I suspect. But really, it was money. It was capital.
Okay, so let's just continue with that. So you gave us a little bit of insight in terms of the International 3.0 model. So let's reflect on, or can you share with us today, some examples of some of the first successes
Sure.
that you had? Because I think you touched on some of the missteps, but what are some of the
Yeah.
successes that came out of that?
So 2.0 was the airplane investing, I would call
Yeah.
it. So we're on 3.0 right now. We opened our first office in London in 2007. We went to New York in 2008. And I think the biggest difference was we weren't chasing deals. We weren't chasing opportunities. We said, we have a great business here in Canada and in Toronto. We know how to invest. We know how to manage. We know how to develop. We have local relationships. We're part of a community. We're going to replicate that in these other markets so that we're not a foreigner. We're going to build ourselves a local business with local people, and we will see ourselves through cycles. So that's a very deliberate decision. It's different than chasing an opportunity. And so we opened an office in London in 2007, New York shortly thereafter, and we were really lucky. We weren't really smart. We were really lucky. We happened to be, in both of those cities, one of the few groups that had a ton of capital right when the financial crisis came. And I'd say our biggest mistake is that we didn't buy enough. But I remember the decisions that we were making at that time. We were second guessing ourselves a lot. We didn't have years and years of track record in these markets. So when we were looking at opportunities, we were saying, is that a good deal? Is this the right street corner to be on, or should we be on another one, and so on and so forth. And so we managed to enter those markets at a time where we rode up the whole cycle in a period where things were fantastic. Opportunities were absolutely on sale. So we got really lucky. And I think today some people would say we're really smart. I'd say we were really lucky. So
Maybe you're a bit of both. Maybe you're a bit of both.
we'll take it.
David, how about you? What about can you share with us some of the early first successes in going international and any missteps that we can learn from?
Yeah, well, sure. Let me talk about the missteps first. There were lots of those. But probably the biggest one for us was as we were expanding, and particularly when we were expanding through acquisition, we really didn't have the systems in place to be able to really understand each of those businesses. And I think the misstep was we struggled with taking advantage of the footprint that we developed in terms of working together, collaboration between offices, and we've I think we fixed that, but that was that I would say is a misstep. I do agree with Michael's point about being the importance of being local. Particularly now, and we're in the U.S. We're seen as a U.S. company. We've been there since the late 70s, and that particularly helps us now with this sort of myopic Buy America type focus that prevails right now, and the same in the UK. We are seen as a UK company. We're seen as an international company, but we are, and we spent a lot of time working on that. So that was the sort of good part of it, was making sure that we are local. Most of our U.S. colleagues, we have 700-800 people in the U.S. Almost all of them are Americans, and with a few Canadians thrown in there. But I think that's an important positive. As far as for us, as far as the successes, I mentioned the Olympics. That's led us into other sort of events, Pan Am Games here in Toronto, bringing that expertise back from London into Toronto, and I think this whole sort of technology side of smart cities has. That's been really successful for us. My colleague here sitting at the table here, Trevor McIntyre, won us a competition in India. There was 98 cities that were submitting for smart city growth, and we won that competition. And actually John Tory, the mayor, was in our office about a little over a month ago in Delhi, and we just opened our new offices, and he made a comment that he was impressed with what we were doing. He said he wished that what we were doing in India was actually being done in Toronto, and it was quite extraordinary that it was being done by a Toronto company. So I think in that field, that has been successful, quite successful for us.
Perfect. Michael?
Just first, the way that Oxford has grown around the world has been better than I think any pension fund has done, probably competitive with any sovereign wealth fund. And they just own some of the best buildings in the world, probably the best portfolio. So just had to point that out.
Yeah.
Like that, thank you. Here, Michael, here's the $5.
I wasn't thinking that. So when we went to Germany, we bought a sale leaseback with Deutsche Post, 292 buildings, not 291 or 293, it was 292. They turned to be exact opposite tenant of what we thought. Very sophisticated, very quick. And they were growing through e-commerce. And it ended up happening. We were worried they were going to shrink. They ended up growing out of our buildings. It worked out okay. I mean, it's hard to be in a city. It's hard to go to another country and be there. This gave us a whole infrastructure over there. Probably 40% of the people made it through the first year. But since then, we built out an incredible team in Germany. And as we were talking about earlier, we were there and ready. It got worse, and all the open-ended funds closed, and we were able to do the largest transaction with a bank, a portfolio transaction with closed-end fund that got us fantastic assets. So we started with sort of financial assets that had some development potential, and as the crisis hit, we were ready, and the Canadian markets were very supportive, and we were able to double and triple the size with a new portfolio that was very high quality. And with that came the ability to attract great people. And we've gone into Austria, we're looking at a few other countries, but it really came from you had to be there, you had to make your mistakes, and as Michael was saying, you had to be local. And then we were able to bring both our ability to execute locally and seeing that Germany was nowhere near the shape the Germans thought they were. And that gave us a chance to buy some of the best assets in the country.
Wonderful. Jim, how about Hatch?
So I think the 90s was a formidable period for Hatch. Of course, many of you remember the 1991 recession, which lasted for quite a long time in Toronto. And interestingly, a lot of our big clients were actually operating overseas. So we established offices in South Africa, and we established a large operation in Australia. There was a large mining boom happening in all of those in the resource sector in those countries, and so we built up, and we were climbing to 11,000 people in that period. At the same time, the transit activity had started again in Toronto with the RTEP program, which started out as a 6-line project, but eventually was cut back to just the Shepherd line. So in parallel, I think the local regional story, we had to be in Toronto to do that work, but at the same time, if we were not an international company operating in Australia, South Africa, we would have not been able to service the clients. So there was a key thing. And today, I think it's fairly certain if we're not a global company, a lot of the clients that we work for, we could not work for. At the same time, being back in Toronto, we wouldn't be doing the work with Metrolinx, we wouldn't be doing work with the TTC and the various other transit authorities if we weren't here. So it's kind of balanced itself out, but clearly a fair bit of our work is still from overseas.
Okay. David, I'm going to start the next question with you. We're interested in your prognosis for the future. So thinking about everything that's going on globally at the moment, some markets are closing borders, others are opening up. What do you see as the best opportunities for business growth, and what are your areas of concern?
Well, first of all, I am really optimistic about the future. And I say that because and specific to my company, and why do I say that? I talked about the importance of long-standing relationships with clients and different projects that extend over time. But to me, the real change, the real difference that's happened really in the last 3 to 4 years is, and it's a big step change in terms of how technology is applied to the business that we're in, and we're really moving from design company, very much into a technology and design company, and the way in which our business is delivered, it's become a complete sort of database. I mean, architecture, engineering is a database operation, and that gives us extraordinary amounts of data to capture. And that relationship that we've had with clients over many years is now changing into a relationship with the buildings that we design and the cities that we're involved in designing. And those are, and that's moving us into past the point of design into life cycle of buildings. It moves us into the areas of artificial intelligence in buildings and in cities, and I think there is extraordinary opportunity for that. So, to me, that's a really exciting time, and that transcends. That's part of urbanization anywhere in the world. That transcends politics. It transcends, and it's interesting how it sort of works relative to economies as well, because one of the reasons why there's such a focus on technology is how do you do more with less, and you sort of lead with if you can lead with a technology solution, I think that's a pretty powerful thing. And so that's and when you combine that with the wealth of data that we've developed as a firm over the years, I mean, the amount of work we just do in urban development in the city of Toronto, led by my colleague Mansour Kazarouni here, that gives us a massive amount of information, and as we capture that data, that's a tool that we're just starting to get into really understanding how to use that. So I'm optimistic. What are clouds out there? I think they're just, to me, they're short term. I think all the talk of, and we're putting a lot of emphasis in growth in the U.S. and it's a rocky time there right now in terms of the moves that are made. It's always sort of when politics get jumpy, clients tend to get a little bit jumpy, but I look upon that as a short term thing.
Michael Turner, your thoughts? Where's the growth opportunities? Where are the concerns?
I think there's a lot of noise right now in terms of concerns. We had I think about a year ago, a long conversation in our office about Brexit and how our local team, called us dumb colonial neophytes. It would never happen. We don't know what we're talking about. And then, of course, they were absolutely shocked that this happened. And now fast forward the clock, we keep convincing ourselves that the fundamentals are going to get worse, and every month we see both better economic data and better real estate data coming out of the City of London than any of us would have thought.
I agree completely.
And it's also proving itself to be the most liquid market in the world. We're selling right now a marquee project for us, really a franchise asset that we didn't want to sell, 122 Leadenhall, and some people may have referred to it or heard it referred to as the cheese grater building. Company out of Hong Kong is paying us a low 2% cap rate for that building. So we'd be irresponsible not to take that money. And if you ask somebody before Brexit if our asset was worth what a group is currently prepared to pay for it, all of us in the room would have said no way. So I think there's more headline noise than there is reality. For us, I think the biggest opportunity is if Canada, I'm going to call Canada two cities, and that's not to take anything away from all the other cities, but let's call it Toronto and Vancouver. We're otherwise in New York, Washington, Boston. We've just done our first deal in San Francisco, and we have an office in London and Paris and Berlin. So 9 cities. The whole real estate world globally does about $1.2 billion in transaction volume. In 9 cities, we can trade in about a fifth of all opportunities, because about $220 billion of the world's opportunity set goes through those 9 cities. And so if we can invest, develop, and manage and see a fifth of all opportunities in great global gateway cities, I think we feel pretty good about just continuing to feed our business model and with opportunities and to build our capabilities in the offices in which we've got today.
Perfect. Jim, your thoughts?
I spent 12 years working at Canary Wharf, partially with Paul Reichman and then with the subsequent leaders. and helping to build that place from a transit perspective. What was exciting about that was actually finding and creating the right projects to actually build both on the development side as well as on the transportation side. And Crossrail, many of you have probably heard about the Crossrail project, which is now called the Elizabeth Line, which will open very soon. And what I'm excited about is coming back to Canada, we've created a group of people who are going to focus more on doing the right projects and making sure that those projects are consistent with where a city wants to go, both from a consensus standpoint and from a financial standpoint. And we're seeing that. We're now expanding more into Australia, more into South Africa, more into the United States. And we're seeing those same issues coming up. What is the right project to do? How should that project be done? And how should that project be funded? And so it's an exciting time. It's a bit of a departure from where we used to be traditionally, but at the same time, the company is coming out from the 2008 recession and doing very well, both locally and around the world. So it's an exciting time, and I'm certainly optimistic about the future. And I'm also excited about the generation that's coming up and getting involved in things. And certainly as Michael said, London is an exciting place, and I think Toronto is becoming that same way too. We dwell on our problems, our housing issues, but there's a lot of great things going on here.
Michael?
So for us, we're a much younger company than the other companies here. We're now getting to a stage where each of our divisions produces cash. It might not sound like a big deal, but trust me, that's a big deal. I'm optimistic, and you're going to hear this from everybody who's active that has a lot of employees and a lot of stuff going on. They're optimistic. Donald Trump was able to convince the U.S. that they were doing badly. They're actually doing the best of any of the G7, the best of everything. And I think we got this overlay of two things. Number one, the news is terrible. He was right. The news is so terrible. 70% of Canadians own their own house, and the crisis we have is they're worth a lot of money. Okay? I mean, that's just crap. I think we can fix a lot of things if all of the government workers work 3 days a week. They are being way too aggressive in terms of how much they're doing. I think we do have issues about our employment base and making sure we have enough people. But I think the two things are, the news is always negative. There's so many better things. The people who have a lot of breath and see it are always optimistic. So I think that's great. The second part is the pace of change is insane. And in an environment where things are going to get better, it's not going to get better for everybody. And I'm not just talking about what they're saying in the US. I'm saying some companies will adapt better, some won't. People who are seeking consistency are going to go broke. It's people who can adjust to not sure what's going to happen today that are going to do a lot better. We got to get away from some of the strategic stuff. We got to work hard. Working hard is a really good thing. I know it's not fashionable, but I think we got to, if you want to compete globally, you don't do it by saying our work-life balance is fantastic. You win by competing with everybody in the world who cares about nothing but taking care of their family. And I think this country needs a lot more of that. Boom.
Okay.
Right on time.
On time, yeah.
Well, I think at this point I'm going to move into the last question. And
You're out of time.
oh, I'm out of time. Do you want me to? One. Okay, it is, because I thought we had about 4 minutes left. Okay, this is just a quick kind of 30 words or less.
Ooh.
Okay, you're doing great global business. You're clearly optimistic about the future and opportunities. Why does Toronto still remain the best place in the world for you to have a headquarters? Jim?
Oh, I think that the variety of talent here, and it's a positive place, and I think you can go from here anywhere. And we're also seen around the world as kind of like really we're great guys. So it works. It works for us.
All those things, and it's a great city to live in.
Yeah.
It's a showcase for us. We bring a lot of our global clients to Toronto to look at urban development, BRT systems, all the things that we're doing here in Toronto that we're doing globally, and Toronto's doing it as well or better than anywhere else.
I mean, number one, being practical, our capital base is here, so that's not going to happen, that we're going to move somewhere else. Our friends at the airport have made it pretty good for us to get anywhere in the world from here on a direct flight. Our tax treaties, the tax treaties we have, Canada, the US, Canada, Europe, et cetera, they're actually reasonable framework in which we can operate a business. And I would say most self-servingly, I don't have to sell my house, although in this market maybe I should, and move. So this is a good place for us to be. our business model is quite scalable. We don't have to replicate IT, HR, legal, et cetera, in every market in which we operate. We need to hire people. We have to hire some of those folks, but we have a scalable business and a history of being here for many decades, and we're going to keep growing around the world from here.
Well, can I tell you the bad news for me from this panel? The Board of Trade last summer pulled the construction sector together to map out the talent needs over the coming 10 years in Toronto. And our report that was produced last fall forecast 146,000 jobs in the Toronto region, 119,000 net new, and the balance are retirement replacements. Oh my gosh, I think we've got too few zeros in that number based on the optimism here. But it's certainly refreshing to reflect on so much optimism and just so much pride that's grown here out of Toronto. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to do work to get our next generation better connected to these opportunities so you guys can keep on doing what you're doing, which is growing a tremendous model. I think what's also interesting about our region at this point in time, if I extend it to include the innovation corridor, is, David, your comments about technology and data and artificial intelligence in the process. And we've got some of the best in the world here working in the AI field and in data analytics. So I think we're really well set up for the future. So please join me in taking a deep bow of thanks to these folks for the amazing companies they've built and the stories they've shared with us today. And with that, Richard, the panel.
Right on time.
Okay. Good job. Thank you, everyone. That's terrific.
You got it now?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, what a great way to get us launched here. Before I thank our panel, let me just say to people standing at the back, there are actually quite a few seats up at the front. Just grab any one. It's a lot more comfortable for the next session here. But let me just say to Jan, Jim, Michael, David, and Michael again, thank you very much. That was truly inspiring. Your companies and you individually have been great pioneers for our city as we take on the world. And let me also say to Jan, who's I know sliding out, Jan, your leadership coming into the Toronto Region Board of Trade in really shifting the focus to an international one for our city, which isn't necessarily the most international of business cities, is something that is just enormously appreciated. And I think that you're going to see a lot more of Jan De Silva and that leadership, and you're already seeing that expressed. But Jan, thank you very much. That was amazing. My name is Richard Joy, and I'm the Executive Director of ULI Toronto, and it's a great pleasure to help launch this symposium, this two-day symposium. Celebrating our city and global leadership isn't something we are especially good at as Torontonians, I know, but the truth is, as you've seen, we have a lot to celebrate. And our predecessors have truly, as we and our predecessors have truly built a globally magnificent city. And while some of who and what we are could be described as unplanned, accidental, or the organic emergence of a confluence of factors, some within our control, some outside of our control, and that was a point I think that was made on this panel, it is perhaps more true to recognize that the broader Toronto region is a product of strong planned vision and execution. It's a realization that a vision of past leadership and the continuation of that vision of those gathered in this room is a key. And it's a recognition that we are no accidental city. Cue the video. Hopefully we got the video up now. Special thanks to the team at Urban Strategies for producing that inspiring video, and apologies to Robert Fulford. As we have purposely built the city region we enjoy today, we must continue to design the region of our future. Our past was no accident, and nor is our future. A focus on the future is a perfect segue for our Electric Cities panel, which also serves as our first introduction to our Symposium co-chairs. As Derek Goring notes in his program message, our symposium throughout the next 2 days advances the three major themes of our 2015 symposium: placemaking, mobility, and technology. But the context that shapes these themes of city building and exploration has changed significantly in those short 2 years. Across each, the future of city building looks very different. Never mind 5 or 10 years ago. Technology and necessity are blurring the focus of once distinct professional lenses of city building pursuits. And this convergence expresses itself throughout our programming. Cities must do more than was ever called on them before. They must build faster and better. They must be champions of social equity and climate change. They need to feed, teach, entertain, and make our lives healthier and more balanced, and they need to drive prosperity and opportunity. But in all that cities do today, they'll need to do even more tomorrow. And this means our cities will have to continue to adapt to change. Change, we all know, is challenging to deliver. Change that demands that we constantly modernize our practices. But it also demands that we approach community differently, that we need to include civil society and community leaders more centrally in our deliberations and progress. And that's why so many attendees at our symposium this year are not from professional industry. Many of you are community leaders from across the wide spectrum of civil society interests. You are here to be part of the conversation as we continue to think about how we embrace the challenges of urban development in a more inclusive way. To expand on all this, and it's precisely why we've assembled our next panel, who, again, are the three co-chairs of this year's symposium, Leslie Wu, Cindy Rottenberg-Walker, and Mark Kinderchuk. Each have programmed one of the three major themes, and collectively we have evolved this idea of electric cities. Our moderator, Sivan Pelvetzian, CEO of Civic Action, is uniquely positioned to animate this discussion. In the interest of time, and I beg Sev's forgiveness in referring you to the program for her biographical details, not her biological. Sorry. Although they are in there in the appendix. Wow. But let me say this much. Sev has led her organization, Civic Action, into an internationally recognized best practice in the complicated pursuit of civic engagement. We are so lucky to have Sivan's leadership in this region, and it is an honor to have her moderate this Electric Cities panel. Sev and the panel, please join us.
Biological information. I'm dying to know what's in the appendix there of your program brochure this morning. Good morning, everybody. We've got, the clock is ticking there. Okay, so thank you, Richard. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning. This is truly an electric 2 days. There's a lot that goes on in this city. There's a ton that goes on in this region. But very rarely do we get to see such a great cross-section of players focused on, frankly, in my view, the most important topic that we're looking at around the world today, and that's the shape of our cities. So I want to thank Richard and ULI for having me be part of this and this great panel that I get to moderate with your very talented co-chairs of this symposium. ULI, I also want to just give a quick tribute to, because I'm very impressed by the leadership of Richard and where this organization has been heading and continues to head at incredible pace and speed to tackle a broader array of issues that cities can't be immune to anymore. And as CEO of Civic Action, I have the great privilege of thinking about these topics on a daily basis. One of my favorite books, it's in fact required reading for any of my senior management teams, is called The Wisdom of Crowds. And I'll save you the Amazon purchase because the thesis is just this. You could put the 10 smartest people in a room and give them a question, and they will come up with an answer. Or you can put 10 random people, the first 10 people that pop up from the Union Station, up on off the escalator. Give them the same question. And those 10 random people will always have the better answer. Why? 2 factors, information and ignorance. Those who are the smartest people in the room may have all gone to similar schools, may have all read similar topics or books, may all know similar people, so their information sources are equal, and their ignorance is equal as well. 10 random people have different sources of information, have different blind spots, different ignorances as well, and so you get a better answer. That's key to the work at Civic Action. That's what this symposium is doing over these next 2 days. And I'm just thrilled to see this group of 600 people that represent a cross-section of society focused on this, taking time out of your day to think about these issues. You have a very distinguished panel up here on the stage. We have Leslie Wu, who is Chief Planning Officer at Metrolinx. We have Cindy Rottenberg-Walker, who's a partner at Urban Strategies, Inc., and we have Mark Kinderchuk, who is President and founder of the Intermarket Real Estate Group. So we're gonna dive in, and I'm gonna throw it first to Cindy. Cindy, we just watched that awesome video, Electric No accidental city video. A lot of accolades thrown across the screen of the great things that Toronto and the Toronto region are doing. What is the accolade that spoke to you the most in that video?
Oh, that's hard. So many. We're intentional of listing. I think there are 5 or 6 of them there. But I guess if I had to pick one, I would say the final one, which is Future City, because I think it really embodies all of the other capacities. I think that's, to me anyway, this is such an exciting time in Toronto, and I think following on the last panel that was here, just talking about the great strengths that we build from here. I think there's so much energy, there's so many creative things happening, there's such a focus on how we take all of that, preserve it, and maximize it. So I would really say Future Cities is where it all starts for me.
Awesome. Okay, Leslie Wu is a friend, so she's not going to take this question the wrong way when I ask it. But when we were standing over to the side here watching the video, and toward the end, PG rating is about to go through the roof. Toward the end of the video, Leslie, under her breath, goes, "Holy shit!" So, Leslie, what was so jaw-dropping about that video for you?
I think I think we're in. You can't see the forest for the trees. So every day we're debating all the minutia of our city, whether it's the transportation, the buildings, the parks, the open space, and not just this Toronto, but the whole region. But when you see it physically from a distance, we always have to step back. It's pretty powerful. And so I think that's why I went, holy shit.
Very powerful indeed. Equally powerful technology. And Mark, I know you in the Symposium team have put a ton of energy and thought into building out a perfectly curated 2 days on this topic. I want to know from you, what is the biggest technological change that's coming down the pipe that's going to disrupt this industry?
I think there's a couple. One that I think everyone can see today and tomorrow is virtual reality. We've really created a separate room, and I encourage everyone to take time out to look at the virtual reality room and the demos and tours. Virtual reality across the board in technology is changing. Artificial intelligence, Dave made a good point. That's really driving autonomous cars. All that data is needed, and in the future there's going to be more. So I think you're going to see the advent of cloud computing, analytics, and who can use information the best and be nimble will be the winners. And so a couple of years ago we had this session and we focused on autonomous cars. And now I think everyone's seen it and learned about it. The future we think is virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and how people use data.
Let's pick up on this question of data, and I'm going to ask Cindy and Mark in succession the same question. If you could crack open any data source that any order of government has at their fingertips today. I thought it was great in the panel just preceding us. Was it Michael Cooper who said one of the things he wishes that government folks would work 3 days a week instead of 5? I think what he meant was to reduce maybe some of that red tape. But I'd love to know from each of you, if you could crack open any set of data, what would you love to have at your fingertips?
Oh, that's hard. Do you have anything you immediately jumps to your mind so I can think a little bit about it?
Well, I think there's a lot out there. I know IBM Smart Cities is working with a number of different cities around the world, Barcelona, Toronto, and I used to work at IBM, and 30 years ago when I was there, they were trying to understand the analytics. And now with logarithms, and you can learn everything about cities, and one of our sessions, frankly, is how you use technology to solve urban problems. So I think that's a good snapshot on how you can use the analytics really with refining your information to make better decisions.
I think, it's tough for me. I think that what would be really interesting to better understand is just how people actually spend their time, really, because there's this debate about whether we're spending it in a way that actually improves the quality of our life. I love Michael Cooper's statement that you need to work hard, we need to play hard, but I'm not sure, and I think we convince ourselves that we're achieving this great balance and that we're doing it all, but really I think we aren't, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Again, I think it's why in the program that we are sharing today that we're very focused on how people are creating and using place, how that creates a way for us to really build that kind of quality of experience and day-to-day life. So I'd be really curious to know how we actually spend our time as compared to how we think we spend our time.
That'd be great to know. So here in the front row as well, we have Hilary Marshall, who's from the Greater Toronto Airport Authority. And so this question I want to ask is about Pearson, because Pearson Airport, everyone in this room has flown through Pearson. You may not have known that airport area is the second largest employment hub in the nation. right? 300,000 people work in and around the airport zone. 90% of the trips going into the airport are by car. So I want to ask Leslie, from the perspective of a regional piece in our transportation network, what is the role for Pearson, for the GTAA, and how do you see that evolving over the next decades?
Well, Pearson is one of two Uber hubs in the region. I'd call Union Station the first. Pearson, it's our international gateway to the rest of the world for most people. So it has a critical sort of large, the scale of the universe, the Earth, a large positioning for the country. I think the other thing that is what is different about how the discussion about Pearson is happening is now considering Pearson, as we are considering Union, part of the urban fabric and how it belongs to people, not just travelers, to other parts of the world. And how are we going to knit Rexdale into Pearson? And how are we going to understand how these places like Pearson have better access? I mean, part of the debate that we're going to have in one of our sessions this morning is about equity and access. And so when we think about this region and we think about the connectivity, it's not just about physical access. Is it affordable? Is it transparent in how people can move around? And Pearson has this great opportunity to change how we think about the region, not just for travelers, but for people that live around Pearson and Mississauga and other parts of Toronto.
So I'm going to come back to Leslie on this question before we move on to another, because you just raised that question of equity and access, and I think this is an important one, and certainly in some of the breakouts will be discussed. So some of you may be following south of the border in Baltimore, Maryland. About a year and a half ago, the NAACP launched a lawsuit against the governor. And they said his transit planning was racist. That there was an LRT which was scheduled to go through African American inner suburbs, and the governor canceled that line and instead said, I want to take the money and I want to put it into bridges and roads and highways, which largely, incidentally, would be servicing urban, but also the suburban largely white neighborhoods of this part of Baltimore. So the NAACP said, wait a minute, under 1964, the Civil Rights Act says you can't use federal money, Section 6, you can't be discriminatory in what that federal funding goes towards. So they said, we're going to take you to court. So a lot of folks are watching this legal case to see if, in fact, transportation planning can be deemed racist because of that equity lens. So I want to go to, maybe I'll start with Leslie, but turn to either of my two panel colleagues as well to answer. What will you be watching for in this case, and how do you manage that issue of ridership numbers and some of the criteria that goes into current state transit planning with some of the other factors around the have-not parts of society today?
So first of all, I think we should be thankful here in Canada that we don't have the history of racism that the US carries as a burden. And especially here in this Toronto region, we are fortunate to be a place that understands difference. We haven't mastered it, but we understand it, and we're working our way through it. But when we think about mobility, and this is two of the sessions, or maybe even three of the sessions that we have planned for the next couple of days, the one that Dina Grazer is leading on the interface between housing affordability and mobility access is a very two-sided coin, and very relevant today as we discuss affordability in this region of housing. The other is in our Disruptions and Innovations panel, Scott Corwin and Sue Zielinski. We welcome back Sue Zielinski to Toronto. We're happy that she's moving back to this region. Those of you that know her, they're going to talk about technology and access from a different angle. So it's less about our romanticism about the technology, and more about how is it actually going to work, and who's it going to impact, and who's it going to really benefit, and is it really going to be better for us? Because I'm a little bit of a skeptic. I don't jump totally on the bandwagon that the technology is going to save all of us. It may save some of us. So we have to be very careful about that.
Okay, Mark, you want to hop in on that? Will technology save us?
Well, it can help make better decisions. And so whether it saves us or not is to be determined, but just the information you can garner. Like I know Columbus, Ohio just did a Smart Cities Challenge and won it, of 7 cities in the United States. And its premise was providing good access to low-income families in a certain section of Columbus. And it was because they have the data. and it was low-income mothers and a whole range of income levels. So the data really, can give you a snapshot of, Baltimore, wherever it may be, where are the incomes, where's the transit use, where are the roads, so on and so forth. So data really helps consolidate that information, provide it, in a source, and make better decisions. And that, to me, is the key.
Great point. Cindy, placemaking, huge theme of the symposium. Taking into account views of people who around public space in particular, we'll say. We have town halls, public consultations. Sometimes we get good value out of them, other times less so. What do you think we can do to bring more diverse voices into these kind of conversations?
Well, actually, I think that it's happening. I think that what you have to just be open-minded to all of the ways in which people actually want to get involved, rather the formal ways in which we invite people to be involved. So again, I think that's one of the primary themes, I would say, building on some of the introductory comments that Richard made in terms of how we chose to position the programming and placemaking this time. So rather than the conventional kind of expert-led ways that we plan, design, manage space, implement initiatives, we've taken a bit of a sidestep and said, how do you actually do it, dealing with the fact that there is a whole connection between all of these different streams, so a literal integration or convergence around all of the lenses of this symposium, but also just about the way we need to find solutions to our urban challenges. We need to do it through partnerships, and I think most importantly, again, for today's conversations, today's and tomorrow's, but really just for the place that we're at in our evolution, is that we need to include the kind of citizen community as partners in that. And I think that again, outside of the formal ways in which we invited in, there's a groundswell of initiatives that are happening which are really exciting. And I think that somewhat enabled by technology, because it's now possible for people to connect around interests, even if our very busy private lives are making it difficult for us just to be in the same spaces all the time, we at least are able to share those interests. And so I think that being very open to all of the things that are happening and really embracing them and pulling them into what we're trying to accomplish is the way we'll be most successful.
Okay, and the use of technology in doing that. So who in the audience is familiar with the app Tinder? Yeah. I'm not going to judge, I just want to know if you've heard of it. Okay, so for those who haven't heard of it, Tinder is a dating app where you and I don't know which way you swipe, but you swipe one way if the head that pops up you're not interested in, you swipe the other way if you are interested, okay? So that's how you figure it. So there's a Tinder for city building. And Mark, I'm going to ask you a little bit about this, but essentially I think they're piloting it right now in Santa Monica, California. So you, instead of going to the town halls or reading the poster boards and going online and subscribing to whatever, you go by the public space that they have an idea about and you swipe. This is the bench I like, this is the PlayStation I like for the kids. You get to swipe. So my question mark is for you. Is the city swipe a technological fad, or is this going to be our future in how we do consultation?
I think using technology will be the future. A couple of years ago when we had the session, we had Jennifer Keesmaat, we had the gentleman from Twitter here. And one of the premises was, how can the community provide more input into decision-making and planning processes? So I think that's another generation of that. The other one that, frankly, we looked at as part of our virtual reality session was, there's a company in San Francisco called OWL, that you can set up a municipality, almost a permanent 3D analysis, so you can look through the lens, and if there's an empty lot that's going to be a 20-story condo, you can see what it's going to look like. And so whether it's a streetscape or a new building, and what I think we find when we're dealing with technology and some of the people that are in that room is a confused mind usually says no. And in the community sense, the more you can share with a vision and show citizens what it can look like, a lot of those issues can at least be discussed. When in the current condition, when there's negative press, which is sells papers, and you're out on the street corner, what's this going to look like? If you can show people virtual reality, whether in a presentation or right on the street corner, then that helps, I think, engage community, citizens, and others to make an informed decision versus a confused, I don't like it, I don't know enough about it. So I think that is really the future, using technology to make better decisions.
Great point. A confused mind usually says no. Hadn't thought about that, but that leads me to my next question, which is for Leslie. So, it's often said beggars can't be choosers, but there seems to be a lot of choosing going on right now at the municipal level as it relates to provincial money for transportation, and then city council saying, no, I don't want this here, I want this money spent somewhere else. So first we saw it in Brampton, when city council turned down hundreds of millions of dollars for a downtown LRT. It was going to go down the main downtown road. And now it's happening in Hamilton with $1 billion in provincial funding for an LRT there. So what's going on here? What's going on where provincial money, which is harder to find than the tooth fairy, is being looked at by municipal councils as not so much over here perhaps? What's happening, and how do we plan for this?
What's happening? That's a good question. I think, it's interesting. When we talk about we need to engage everyone in a decision and a decision making, one would question, and it's several levels of governance. So it's provincial money, yes, but they're projects that are happening in individuals' homes and neighborhoods. So how people are being engaged in this democratic process of where it is and how it is and all the particular, there's a disconnect that's happening. And it's happening over time, because these projects and decisions don't happen in 1 week or in 1 month. They take many years. And the players are changing, people are moving, people are coming. And so by the time one decision is made over here, the constituency where it started has changed. And that's my view of what's happening. There's another fundamental piece, I think, and we blame politics for a lot of things, but one has to question, it was in the Globe or somewhere at Toronto last week, someone said, is it really the politics or is it the governance that is causing us to arrive at where we are in these instances? That being said, lots of projects are moving forward, right? And when John Lawrence talks this afternoon about the suburbs and what's happening out there, it's not unique, the situation that we find ourselves in where suddenly, and in fact, this region has a history of doing it. This is something in our zeitgeist that causes us to always be overly cautious about every little step forward. It's our strength and our weakness. And so the citizens of Brampton or the citizens of Hamilton, if they're having they're second guessing themselves, or they're second guessing each other, or they're worrying about it, it's not good for transportation in terms of moving us forward, but it's the process we set ourselves up for to a certain degree.
Thank you. So just down the road in Hamilton, before we get there, of course, Burlington, and I want to ask this question to Cindy. I know you've done a lot of great work in Burlington. A few summers ago, in the span of, I think, about 8 hours, Burlington had enough rain. It was sort of 2 months worth of rain in 8 hours. It flooded something like 3,000 basements and homes, including the mayor of Burlington, who was vacationing and got the call and had to come home and find everything sort of floating from the basement up. So city building is now on the front lines of the climate change and global climate challenge. What are we going to explore through the conference, the symposium over these next 2 days, and what can we do to weather future-proof our homes and our cities going forward?
So yes, absolutely. Water is a big issue. And in fact, I think it's one of our first sessions called Waterproof. It's exactly on that point. So just to take a step back a little bit in terms of, so you're absolutely right. A lot of people blame urban kind of settlement patterns for concentrating some of these effects of climate change, but also the place where things will be resolved. So it's a real testing ground. The way that the lens that we've taken for this conference piece is everything from full international perspective. We have somebody here from Holland, from the Netherlands, who's going to give us his perspective. I mean, obviously, where better to deal with the issues of water management than Amsterdam and the Netherlands over the last many centuries, but also working very actively with the 100 Resilient Cities initiative, which is a global perspective on how you capture this kind of really intelligent set of conversations and advancement in terms of planning and technologies. And then bring that to a very local level. So we've got, and a regional, starting with the regional level in terms of how do you manage the watersheds, so that you're thinking like Toronto obviously is under the jurisdiction of a whole series of conservation authorities, all of which are very carefully thinking about how can you plan for these interruptive events. But even more importantly, tactically on the ground, how do you make specific decisions? How do you respond? So we've got somebody from the Evergreen Brickworks, Shauna Irvine, talking. They've been through 3 major catastrophic flooding events and really have been able to figure out the small to large solutions that will allow them to respond better. And I think that, I was listening to a program, I think it's By Design on CBC podcast, sort of an older Anna Maria Tremonti set of sessions, which are excellent if you haven't listened to them. But the idea that instead of, we've spent the last 5, 6, maybe more decades trying to push water away. Now what I think we have to do is figure out how to welcome it in and get rid of it quickly in a much more naturalistic kind of way. So welcoming it into our landscapes, dealing with it in our architecture. So
that's great. And I know we have Will Fleisig from Waterfront Toronto is going to be part of the symposium. Chris Glasik, I know, is at the back from Waterfront Toronto. They're doing a great, just incredible work right now. The Portland's planning. This is a topic that isn't going away. 100-year floods are now happening every 40 or so. So it's something we need to wrap our head around. So I live in a downtown Toronto neighborhood that, you do the alley parking, right? You drive in the alley and then you park the cars. So the kids, I have 2 little kids, and they play in the alley, which my mom, it baffles them. Where's my grandkids? They're playing in the alley, Mom. But they ride their bikes, they skateboard in the alley. And I was out there yesterday, and the sewer grid, has a date stamp of 1930 on it, right? And so, that's a long time ago, that piece of infrastructure. In the States, I used to live in Washington, D.C. There are parts of the sewer system that date back to the Civil War that are still part of that piping network. So my question is for Mark. My grandma used to say they don't build things like they used to. When I look at that sewer grid lid, when I think about some of those pipes that fed the water systems of a nation for almost 200 years, is it true? Are we building stuff today that is not as good as it once was?
That's, I guess, to be debated. I'll let Leslie talk.
We'll come to Leslie. Yes, okay. Leslie clearly has a view on this too.
I just bought a bunch of appliances. The first set lasted me 20 years. I'm told I'm only to expect 10 years.
Yeah. Less,
whether that's good or bad.
Less. Yeah, 7 maybe.
Sorry, that's just appliances.
Well, just on the infrastructure side,
bring it back to infrastructure.
Okay. I'll frame this. We're doing a project now that there's always been smart buildings last 10, 20 years. We're working with the municipality to do smart infrastructure. So we're building stormwater management, we're building potable water pipes and sanitary, and we're putting sensors in each one of them. And the sensors, each one, I had to do this proposal, frankly, on stormwater management. And the guy gave me a proposal, well, we have to go in our hip waders and go out there and test the water. I go, why don't we just put a sensor in there? And you don't have to go out there 3 times a year. It goes right to the conservation authority, gives you alkaline levels, temperature, everything you need. And that's what we're trying to do. Similar with sanitary pumping stations. It's pumps usually 9 to 5 during the peak times. We're going to pump after 11 o'clock p.m. So it gives less stress on the pumping station, gives more wear and tear, it can last longer. Third one is on water pipes. When there's breaks in a system and it floods and people are upset because there's a closure in the road, well, we can test, frankly, the water pressure and if there's any leaks coming. So technology with smart infrastructure with the municipality can help make infrastructure last longer and be more efficient. So I would frame it that way. I think there's a future with sensors are really just easy to do now, but using it in the municipalities to connect with private developer, we're building it, then we have to transfer it over, plan a subdivision to a municipality, there's got to be a connect. And that is, I think, a really important next step.
That's great. Leslie, you've been at Metrolinx for almost a decade.
I know, it's shocking.
No, you still look 19, Leslie. We all agree with you. In those 10 years, almost 10 years, you've seen a lot of change. You've seen a lot of projects, as you say, get planned and get underway and get built. What's the biggest mistake Metrolinx has made?
Biggest mistake? I think the audience has the answer.
You notice there's no roaming mic. You can't answer. It's just Leslie.
I'm not sure I'd call it mistake.
No, okay, call it a learning.
Because let's think about it.
Canadian.
In 2008, when we did the big move, the word Snapchat didn't exist. Instagram did not, nobody even knew what it could have been. We thought that autonomous vehicles were the Jetsons, and we thought there would never be enough money to begin to even attack the infrastructure deficit. And the word mobility hub was like, wow, we've created a new word, and we were concerned it would just stay as black and white on a page. So there is a lot that maybe you can call them mistakes, but things that we did not address. We were very focused on the build. And I would say, as we have the opportunity now to review that plan, we are having to kind of look at a bigger, broader breadth of what the plan can address. And the other thing, we can truly take to heart what we started in 2008 talking about. This is a plan about people, not machines. So now that we've got the build well underway, and we have all kinds of, some of these people in these room helping, all these brains helping us get us there, we can focus on optimizing what we already have, which was something that we didn't have the opportunity to do at that time. And we can focus on really leveraging things like the first and last mile, thinking about fares and pricing, thinking about operations and how our local transit services are going to connect to the region, there's so much more, customer service, technology, and we can kind of rest somewhat a little more relaxed on the fact of the catch up and keep up. That being said, I don't call it a mistake, it's a wish, is that the move to have more sustainable revenue tools for this region, not only for transit, but I can see I would say the same thing for affordable housing, for our infrastructure in general, is yet to show up. And we need to continue pushing for that, because on all these spectrums, the placemaking, the technology, the mobility, we will at certain times in our future fall off little cliffs if we can't figure out how to sustain that. And that's why the Electricity's theme is so important, is moving all these things together, not one at a time and in big, in feast or famine cycles, which is what we need to move away from. So it's not a mistake, it's just we are evolving, and it's taking us bloody long to evolve, but we're getting there.
No, and you're doing outstanding work as you do. Cindy, you have the unique pairing of having studied urban studies and psychology, I believe.
Yeah.
So I'm
You've
hoping
done your homework.
a little bit. So I'm hoping you can shed some light on this. So it seems as if in the last 5-10 years, cities really got sexy. And if you look at where young people are choosing to enter their schooling, the urban planning jobs, the urban planning programs are just bursting at the seams for capacity. I'm told that the number of urban planning jobs grew by 30% over the previous last years. And so that's a climb that's almost as fast as house prices in this city. What is behind that rise to you?
That's so interesting, because just as a little step back, since you're back in my history of original studies, I didn't even know that planning was a possible job opportunity when I was in my undergrad program. So it was just by complete coincidence I got introduced to somebody who was looking for summer interns to work for the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, doing something called planning. And I literally had to look it up, and there was almost no information available. So it's pretty interesting, date myself a little bit, sort of 35 or so years ago, I guess, that now it's the sexy, hot job that people want. So I'm really actually thrilled about that. When my kids were little, we used to watch TVO, and the engineers were always on, forget what it was exactly called, but the engineers were, and with all due respect to all of my engineering colleagues in the room, they were all taking credit for city building, and I thought, why are planners not doing this? So I think it's finally our time. I think that there's a lot of reasons. What I think is that planning is at its heart multidisciplinary. It lets you be interested and impactful in so many different things. So I think that that's really interesting to this generation, the idea that rather than maybe having to change your career all the time, you just change the things that you focus on within one career. I mean, I've never actually thought about it, but I think that might be one reason. That's certainly one of the reasons why I have had such a rewarding experience in planning, is that what we do from one year to the next is completely different We in our shop kind of describe it as like being in graduate school for the entirety of our careers. So I hope that is some reason why. And then obviously cities are sexy right now. That there's a lot of interest, just in people are really understanding that it's the place to be inspired, it's the place to be part of things. So I think that must have something to do with it too.
It must indeed. Mark, I want to ask you a question. There's a lot of talk these days about the new National Infrastructure Bank. So the federal government announced this. They're busy working up the parameters. I gather by the end of this year they want to have that legislation passed and maybe the new head of that bank underway, the location of where that bank will fit in Canada understood, and some $35 billion in seed funding set aside from the last budget to start to get that active. What would you like to see, Mark, the National Infrastructure Bank do or not do in the years ahead?
Well, I think the key, and I think it's been discussed before, is implement. There's been such a long gestation period, and then it spans different governments and things go away. So, in my realm, people talk about shovel-ready land, but to get things happening in real time. And then what unfortunately seems to happen is it goes the circuitous route. There's changes in governments, and things don't go forward. So really implementation, execution, which is key. The other one is, like I'm doing with a project right now that I'll take it back to technology, infrastructure is fiber optic networks. And people think about the typical infrastructure, roads, bridges, so on and so forth. But now, it's really who's got access to broadband, what kind of, there's dark fiber and lit fiber. And what we're seeing right now, like in office buildings, they're scoring. What kind of score do you have? And people say, what does that mean? Well, how fast is your broadband? Well, I don't know. Where's your pop room? Is it above the 100-year flood storm? Is it above the 500-year flood storm? So the spec is saying, make sure you got broadband that's got lots of capacity, and make sure your pop room, your connection room, is above a floodplain. And so that's a kind of given. And then one thing that we're seeing is the major corporations, which bring a lot of jobs, are asking for dark fiber. And a lot of municipalities don't even know what it means. Well, we don't need that. I go, well, absolutely. If you want to bring Amazon or Microsoft or ABC or XYZ to your community, you need dark fiber.
Can you explain what that is for someone?
The difference is lit fiber is essentially that's already got the fiber optics lit by a local, we'll call it retailer. Dark fiber is by a larger corporation that's got capability to light it yourself. You put your communications at both ends, and then you don't have to pay millions of dollars of monthly fees. Think of your phone bill. If you got retail from Rogers, TELUS, whoever, you're paying retail. And a big company, that's millions of dollars a month. And then they put the equipment themselves, light it themselves, and then they don't have to pay those fees. They take it to control. So to get those types of corporations who are smart, they go, I don't want lit fiber. I don't want to have a Rogers, frankly, Bell monopoly. I want options. And without economic development people, they don't even realize that. So that's where I think the connection is in terms of technology and infrastructures. What's infrastructure of the future? It's broadband.
Leslie, you want to get on this?
I just want to make sure that the federal government supports the right projects. I know it's important to get projects done, but let's make sure it's quote unquote the right projects.
Okay, well that leads me to our next question, which is coming back to you. They say all politics is local. We also know that we live like a region, right? So 2.2 million trips, goods, people moving amongst this region every single day. So we saw that dichotomy of politics being local, but the regional lived experience. We saw that absolutely in fine order when Mayor Tory attempted to introduce road tolls just before the break. And even if the province hadn't stamped that down by saying, no, you may not do this, there was a loud and vocal chorus from parts of the 905 saying, no, you can't do that. You can't slap road tolls on the Gardiner and on the DVP. That's just not fair. So, Leslie, my question is for you. And how is it that we're supposed to live and plan like a region when politics or governance can't help but get in the way?
Everything has its time. And in the sense that we are such a complex region, to get all the complete alignment to move forward is very weighty. And so one would say that 10 years ago, first of all, we wouldn't even be talking about transit. 5 years ago, okay, now we're talking about revenue tools. Here we are today, a municipality is saying we want revenue tools, but all the other pieces are not lining up. And having worked both on the political side, the private sector side, the not-for-profit side, I would say there are mechanisms to ensure that that alignment comes more quickly, but we don't have them in place. They're somewhat voluntary. And to Richard's, this kind of debate about whether we're an accidental city or an accidental region, there are certain things that we are very deliberate about in this region, and certain things, which is, to your point, the incident on the tolls, I think it's that it isn't there yet. And we kind of wish, you kind of wish things were more aligned all the time, but it never happens. And so we have to build structures that enable that, but we can't. I'm very, I'm not so sure how we get there, Sev, because the political cycles, they come and they go. We cannot dismiss the democratic process, but we need advocacy and voices and critical mass, because politicians generally follow where the public is. And in this case, the whole region wasn't on board. One municipality was, and I would suspect the province is, I don't know their decision making around all these things, but it's an indicator of not everything's aligned. How did we get, not we, there's, and I think Richard Florida is going to talk about this divide, right? Where we think we've got everything lined up, everybody in one little, I'll call it a clique, is all rooting for it. But if we haven't really canvassed everyone, we get a Brexit, we get a Donald Trump, we get all the other things that we get that look, we're surprised by it, but it's our blind spots. So it means in this case that we didn't have all the ducks lined up.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that answer. One of the areas that we seem to have great agreement in, that is at also a crisis point, is the social housing in this city in particular. So the state of social housing in this town is so dire that hundreds of Toronto community housing units are expected to close by the end of this year, unless major investment happens, and some 7,500 units will close over the next 5 years. Now, a lot of folks are looking at this problem, a lot of suggestions on how to deal with this. Some are looking at converting old police stations and TTC lands in the city's west end to see into future affordability units, but we're clearly at the crisis point. So I'm going to let any of my panelists here take a stab at this one. What angle of the housing crisis isn't being looked at hard enough or needs to be emphasized more?
Well, I think, it's timely. We obviously have just had a series of very important announcements from the provincial government. We'll hear from Premier Wynne tomorrow, probably more about it. So I think that certainly first starts in trying to deal with these complex interacting systems of market and affordability and government support. So that it's all tricky in terms of the dynamic. But I think that certainly, again, I think one of the things that Toronto can really celebrate that others all over are looking to us is the way that it's not enough, but the way that the Toronto Community Housing Corporation is revitalizing and replacing units through big and small initiatives like Regent Park, obviously, is a fundamentally important example of contemporary city building in terms of building on something really that was invented here, where Toronto built mixed-use, income-integrated communities, starting with the St. Lawrence neighborhood. So Regent Park, Alex Park, we're delighted. Our firm was just awarded the Phase 2 component of that work in terms of rebuilding. So I think that's fundamental. We just need to step it up and be able to do it faster and more consistently. I think the suggestion of looking at some of the underutilized places that we have is really interesting. We're in a bit of a wave. There was a period of time when local schools were being closed, which are really well located, obviously at hearts of communities. That's not so much the case anymore, but I think that just being able to be a little open-minded about how we think about where we might want to pursue those kind of opportunities is really important.
So I don't know why we would be so surprised about the situation we find ourselves in many respects. It's no different in terms of the catch-up and keep-up that we experience on transit, we're now experiencing with housing. We're going to experience it with schools and education. We're going to continue to experience it, I think, with healthcare. If we keep doing this, if we can't figure out how to move all these things together. It's like, if you play Sim City, if you put all your money in the police stations, your houses are going to catch on fire because you haven't funded the fire department. So I think the thing that we need to, when we think about housing, I mean, we in this region, this city in the 80s, we were ahead of everyone. In the same way we were ahead of everyone in transit. And we allowed it, for all different reasons, to fall behind. So we need to catch up and keep up on the housing. It's no different than transit in the sense that we need to figure out how to sustain the investment, because these are, the capital market doesn't necessarily provide for, and that's what government is for. It provides for those public services that allows access and to all kinds of shelter and mobility. So, but we haven't figured it out. And so we keep going in these booms and busts on the different facets of our cities. And it's a cycle we've put ourselves in, and I'm not sure how we get out of it, but it needs, for our cities to succeed, this region to succeed, we're going to have to figure it out, or people will leave. They'll just get fed up and they'll leave. Well, sorry, that's a dark note to end on.
Not at all. No, that's it. You speak truth to power.
I'm staying. I'm not leaving.
So another. We're at Opportunity 3 days from now. I guess the Premier's going to be speaking tomorrow, which is outstanding. And then this Thursday, her government will table their next provincial budget. What areas would you be looking for as it relates to city building, any of you, that you hope this budget, with that order of government, speaks to?
One of the things that was touched on, but I think not enough from the federal budget, was innovation. Everyone uses that word, but they don't execute. I think it was very light. They made a lot of comments, but really, where are you going to invest your money? How are you going to do it? What kind of clusters you're going to focus on? And I think executable plans versus just generic comments. And I think that's going to be the make or break, because I obviously, with technology innovation, the Toronto Waterloo Innovation Corridor is a key thing in Canada. And unless they make really hard decisions of investing in it, it won't happen to the way it can. So I think it's really execution. A lot of talk, but execution of what you want to do.
I think just building on that, I mean, obviously affordability is the number one thing, but we've covered that. So I would say just continuing to really value and recognize the importance of the education system from every level, beginning from kindergarten right through to the university programs that capture, whether we're actually enabling our university grads to innovate, are we keeping up and getting ahead? But I think that, to me, one of the most important ways in which Toronto has succeeded as this diverse city, that we hear about, that we saw in the video earlier, is that we have this absolute capacity to integrate newcomers, to get them, really right up the kind of learning curve to be able to find their way in our society, and I think that that's fundamentally important. So I would really want to make sure we just keep doing that better than everybody else.
Thank you. So I'm a good public servant, so I'm not going to comment on the budget. I think at Metrolinx we are really encouraged by the government's ability to sustain its commitment to the legacy that we're building, and we hope that the budget will continue to do that.
We all do. Last question, it's a fun one. In that video that Richard showed us just before this panel began, there were such beautiful shots of the city, of the region, from the air, from the water, from what's there today and what's coming. I want to ask each of these panelists, what's your favorite spot in this city or region? Where do you like to go?
I think we all live in the same neighborhood.
So clearly, that is a hot spot in the region. Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Beaches, boardwalk.
The boardwalk and the beaches, okay.
My favorite place is Corktown Commons, which is part of the waterfront revitalization, for lots of reasons, because it's like an invisible engineering project, so you don't know that that's a highly engineered environment when you're there. It just feels like you've disappeared into nature, and full of beautiful places for little kids to play, which is really important.
Awesome.
Union Station. Well, no, I have to say, it's kind of obvious I love Union, but that's where our offices are. But every day, every morning, every evening, I feel like the whole world comes to that spot, because this region is it's a human experiment, and everybody from around the world comes here, and in the rush hour in the morning and the evening, and you stand there in that, it's humanity, and I love it.
You're absolutely right. The whole world has chosen to gather here. I want to thank these panelists for choosing to gather here with you this morning and for curating such a tremendous 2-day program here for the ULI Symposium. I want to thank Richard and the talented group, and thanks also for letting me be part of this session. Thanks, guys.
They wanna.
Sitting or standing? Oop.
Well, you're going to get a nice picture at the end of the session. Thank you, Sev, Mark, Cindy, and Leslie. What a great job setting the table for the programming ahead of us and the first set of programming sessions, concurrent sessions after our morning coffee break. My name is Rob Spanier. I'm partner and principal of Live, Work, Learn, Play. I also had the privilege of being the past chair of ULI Toronto. And so my duties are very straightforward, and I'll do them in a moment. I just want to thank everyone for making time today and tomorrow to be here. ULI Toronto has come a long way over the last decade, and it's really a tribute to all the people in this industry, in this region, that are pushing so hard to think about our future. And so on behalf of ULI Toronto, thank you very much. Enjoy the next couple days. There are some incredible sessions ahead, really interesting dialogue, and take a moment to talk to each other, because a lot of the times at these conferences, you're going from session to session, bump into each other. Part of the whole beauty of ULI is to get to know those around us, and I think we've got a really strong community. So we have a lot of packed programming over the next couple of days. Follow your schedules, as Richard said, closely to maximize your time. We have about a brief 20-minute coffee break, after which we ask you to be seated in your first session at 10:30 a.m. sharp. Coffee will be out in the hallway, and then you can move over to the left or to your right, depending on how you're sitting. Each session is 50 minutes, and we also ask that at the end of each session you move on to the next session, because we have a pretty packed schedule. After our morning, we don't want you to miss our dynamic lunch speaker, Gabe Klein, who will begin at 1:30 after an hour of networking lunch at 12:30. With this, I wish you all a great conference, and I want to thank our panelists for their contribution to this program and to a great discussion. Thanks very much.